All right, take a look at your prompt that you have here in front of you. We're going back in time to Mr. Kane's senior year. Ooh. Nostalgia.
Is that why
No, when I graduated in '98.
I wasn't even born yet.
What do you think?
I'm just wondering.
All right. At the top. Okay. Enough. Before you read the prompt, knowing that it's rhetorical analysis, what is the first thing that is going to strike you as this is different from any other rhetorical analysis you have ever seen this year?
there are two different passages?
There are two different passages. They are letters, and you've had letters before. I think the last time we had a letter was when we were discussing Abigail Adams. She wrote that letter to her son. For rhetorical analysis on an AP exam, your two most likely, not guaranteeing it can only be these things, but your two most likely types of text would either be letter or speech. The fact that you have two passages, two letters, and this is not mock letters like the Onion, these are legitimate letters, is atypical, unusual, not completely rare. It's not that '98 was the only year that they did two passages. I think the most recent time that they did two passages might have been like 2009 or 2010. So it's not commonplace, but it's not like it's a once every 10, 20 year event that would happen. All right. So now, two letters does not mean twice as long. It's still 40 minutes. It doesn't mean you're writing about 7 different rhetorical devices within 2 letters. It just means that structurally some things are going to have to be a little bit different than what you would normally do. Take a look at the prompt itself. Following letters constitute the complete correspondence between an executive of the Coca-Cola Company and a representative of Grove Press. Coca-Cola, we've heard before. Grove Press, maybe not quite so much. Big company, smaller company. Then read the letters carefully, then write an essay analyzing the rhetorical strategies each writer uses to achieve his purpose and explaining which letter offers the more persuasive case. So not only do you have letter number 1 over here, letter number 2 over here, eventually the numbers will show up, but you also have to do 2 different tasks. First one, analyze strategies, identify purpose, similar to what we've kind of done before, but then you have that almighty and explain which letter offers the more persuasive case. Pretending that time's not an issue, structurally, how do you think you would set this up? Bryn goes, I don't know. So go like 1 like we have here, 2 here, and then you could do that more persuasive case, and that could be paragraph number 3. And I think structurally that makes the most sense. It would certainly work. I don't think that would, if we were to do this within 40 minutes, I don't think that would work for everyone, because you might start to realize after your first body paragraph, I don't have time for 2 more. If that were, some of you would, but if that were the case where you had to condense it down to 2, what could you do? Again, not because Annie's set up there's anything wrong with it, just to kind of give us some options as the different stuff that you could do. So you have to condense it down to 2 body paragraphs for time. What would be some options?
I think I would do like the weaker one first, and then do this like the stronger one second, and then say, and this one was more effective because, and then explain why.
So if we're just playing the what if game. First letter, more effective, you're going to combine these 2 things into 1 paragraph, do this one first, and then end up doing that whole combination second. And if it was the other way, vice versa, you could do 3 and 2 over here, and then do this one first, and then at that point you could do this one second. I like that answer. Annie's blown away by disappearing ink. It did. So then I could do 3 plus 2. Now you're going to still do this letter first. Now you'll do this letter second, because that paragraph you're going to be emphasizing more persuasive, and it'll probably be a little bit lengthier of a paragraph as well. Yeah, that'll be good. Could you combine, not because there's anything wrong with what you said, could you combine number 1 and 2 into 1 paragraph? Do both letters in a paragraph, and then explain which one is more persuasive? We got a no over here, we got a yes over here.
I think think you'd have to have one or more devices to be able to work.
Yeah, I think you're probably right with that. You would certainly have to read the letters first, and I don't think you would want to say immediately I'm going to combine the two letters. If, and I'm just making up devices, let's say you end up taking a look at syntax, and you're also looking at some type of use of tone in letter number 1, and you find syntax and tone equally important in letter number 2, then yes, I think you could combine them and it would be okay to go back and forth. If you're taking a look at diction, imagery, syntax, tone over here, then that paragraph's really going to get kind of convoluted. What I would not do, no matter what, is I would not do 2 body paragraphs about the devices in this one, 2 body paragraphs about the devices in that one, another body paragraph with which one is more persuasive. At that point, it's just going to get too nuts and lengthy and become a mess. So ideally, yeah, I think you go 1, 2, 3. If that's not going to work, whichever one you find to be more persuasive, that'll be the second paragraph, because then you'll also kind of be wrapping up why it's the more persuasive one. There would not be an incorrect answer as to which one you find more persuasive. You wouldn't get a 4 on the prompt because Anna chose the wrong letter. It would be totally up to her explaining why it's more persuasive. I think most of you will agree which one is more persuasive, but it doesn't mean you have to choose that. Any structural issues? Most important thing, don't flip out and start yelling and screaming if there's 2 passages that show up on a rhetorical analysis. Line numbers, basically the same as if there was just one big passage. Is that your flipping out face? Yeah. Dear Mr. Seaver, notice 1970, so we have Iris E. Herbert, or Herbert if you're French, writing this letter. So the Coke guy writing to Grove Press. Dear Mr. Seaver, several people have called to our attention your advertisement for Diary of a Harlem School Teacher by Jim Haskins, which appeared in the New York Times March 3rd, 1970. The theme of the ad is, "This book is like a weapon. It's the real thing." Siddhartha, like a weapon. And what does it suffer? You desire?
Yes.
You suffer. Since our company has made use of It's the Real Thing to advertise Coca-Cola long prior to the publication of the book, we are writing to ask you to drop using this theme or slogan in connection with the book. So, important thing, we now know what the purpose of this letter is. Don't use our slogan. When's the last time you drank a Coca-Cola?
Why would you say a book is the real thing? That's so weird. Also, my last time was subject.
It's real.
Obviously, it's real.
Or is it? Siddhartha says.
Nothing is real.
Nothing.
I think it's real, except the song which leads you to something.
We believe, paragraph 3, that you will agree that it is undesirable for our companies to make simultaneous use of the real thing in connection with our respective products. There will always be likelihood of confusion as to the source or sponsorship of the goods, and the use of such prominent companies would dilute the distinctiveness of the trade slogan and diminish its effectiveness and value as an advertising and merchandising tool. It's a little alliteration. It's the Real Thing was first used in advertising for Coca-Cola over 27 years ago to refer to our product. We first used it in print advertising in 1942 and extended it to outdoor advertising, including painted walls, some of which are still displayed throughout the country. The line has appeared in advertising for Coca-Cola during succeeding years. For example, in 1954, we used "There's This About Coke, You Can't Beat the Real Thing" in national advertising. We resumed national use of It's the Real Thing in the summer of 1969, and it is our main thrust for 1970. Please excuse my writing so fully, but I wanted to explain why we feel it necessary to ask you and your associates to use another line to advertise Mr. Haskins' book. We appreciate your cooperation and your assurance that you will discontinue the use of It's the Real Thing. We're not there yet. Go ahead. Stay in the present. I was going to say that line next. So how's he trying to get his point across that you should not do this, and like kind of offer reasons as to why you should not be using the slogan. So what are, again, I don't want to say devices, but what are things that you notice Herbert doing to get the point across?
He says that it would confuse like people with the products because if more than one product is using the same slogan.
So that whole confusion that would be taking place. Mentioned I'm not trying to make you say alliteration, but he kind of went a little using some stronger language, dilute distinctiveness, diminish its effectiveness and value as advertising and merchandising. Keep in mind who he's writing about an advertisement. So if it's going to diminish the effectiveness of the advertisement, hey, you want to be aware of this because it could end up kind of being a problem for you as well. So you could take a look at the alliteration to emphasize, but the confusion, what kind of thing like ethos, pathos, logos, what type of, there's some logical appeal to it. Hey, this makes sense as to why you wouldn't want to do it. Plus, he also mentions it's ours. We have it. What phrase does he use throughout the whole entire letter? It's the real thing, and I'm not going to highlight every single one, but he certainly goes over and over and over with the use of it's the real thing, probably to emphasize who owns it. We do. Coca-Cola. It's the real thing. Probably has it on the envelope, by the way. It's the real thing. Olaf, did you have another one? 1942, 54, 69. We're still going to use it here in 1970. The book has just gotten published, so they're trying to avoid the he said, she said type argument. You could, I think you used the word details. You could say details as a device. Again, details works with nonfiction. It could be dates. You could even kind of build off the whole logic, logos, hey, here's when we used it. So again, not saying maybe we had it first. We used this 27 years ago, long before the book, and here's how we've used it, and we're going to continue to use it. It's not as if that was something that we did use 27, 26, 25 years ago, but we haven't used it since. It's still part of who we are.
He kind of uses like the company's credibility too to make it seem like more like it's just something that they should give into, that they should understand. Because he says he uses we more so than I, and like it's talking about the whole company is like kind of in agreement.
Well, and not only is the whole company in agreement, but like Coca-Cola is a big company. It's a powerful corporation enterprise. They're flexing muscle here a little bit. Thank you for your cooperation and the assurance that you will discontinue the end of the letter. You could like draw a little picture of a mic drop there. He's basically going, argument's over, done, thank you. No reason to discuss this any further. Which I don't want to make it seem like you have to use ethos, pathos, logos by mentioning the credibility of the company, who we are, don't mess with us. You could in some ways go ethos. I think you also could go, thinking of a T word that we did mention yesterday, as to it's kind of an assertive or an authoritative. You might even argue a threatening tone that's taking place. No, we will not beat you up is not the word choice, but you kind of get that feeling coming across. Don't mess with Coke. So you could say authoritative, assertive, whatever word works best for you with tone. You gonna write about all those things? Probably not. I'd say you pick two of them. You're in pretty good shape as to what the guy's using so far as his letter. Strong letter, effective letter. Like as the overall devices strategies, you can, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with using them. It all really goes back to what type of passage you're ultimately dealing with. I think sometimes ethos, pathos, logos can get a little vague, and people will use it as a fallback option. When I don't know what to write about, I can write about ethos, pathos, and logos. I think this would be a case where it's definitely being utilized. And even pathos in a little way with that emotional appeal of we're Coke, you're not, kind of thing coming across. I would just caution against, from here on out, every single rhetorical analysis you going ethos, pathos, logos, because I think some people might oversimplify it past it. This would be one where you could do it. Dear Mr. Herbert, thank you for your letter of March the 25th, which has just reached me, doubtless because of the mail strike. There's the mail strike, postal workers in 1970, so it took a little bit longer. We note with sympathy your feeling that you have a proprietary interest in the phrase, it's the real thing, and I can fully understand that the public might be confused by our use of the expression and mistake a book by a Harlem school teacher for a six-pack of Coca-Cola. Accordingly, we have instructed all of our salesmen to notify bookstores that whenever a customer comes in and asks for a copy of Diary of a Harlem School Teacher, they should request the sales personnel to make sure that what the customer wants is the book rather than a Coke. This, we think, should protect your interest and in no way harm ours. Picturing a person ordering a book on Amazon,
Are you sure you don't want
and they open it up, where's my Coke? Good at it. We would certainly not want to dilute the distinctiveness of your trade slogan, nor diminish its effectiveness as an advertising and merchandising tool. I feel like we read that before. But it did not occur to us that since the slogan is so closely identified with your product, those who read our ad may well tend to go out and buy a Coke rather than our book. We have discussed this problem in an executive committee meeting, and by a vote of 7 to 6, decided that even if this were the case, we would be happy to give Coke the residual benefit of our advertising. I don't think they really voted on it. Okay, just making sure we picked up on that. Bryn's brain's been, kind of iffy, so keeping her in the loop. Problems not unsimilar to the ones you raised in your letter have occurred to us in the past. You may recall that we published Games People Play, which became one of the biggest nonfiction bestsellers of all time and spawned conscious imitations. Games Children Play, Games Psychiatrists Play, Games Ministers Play, etc. Games People Play is a real book. He's not making that up. Games Children Play is a real book. He is not making that up. I'm not so sure about the ministers and psychiatrists. Honestly, I haven't looked at BarnesandNoble.com to see if I can purchase the book, but I'm guessing that one's probably not around. I am sure you will agree that this poses a far more direct and deadly threat to both the author and ourselves than our use, my mistake, not his, use of It's the Real Thing. Further, Games People Play has become part of our language, and one sees it constantly in advertising as a newspaper headline, etc. The same is true of another book which we published 6 or 7 years ago, $100 Misunderstanding. Given our strong sentiments concerning the First Amendment, we will defend to the death your right to use It's the Real Thing in any advertising you care to. We hope you would do the same for us, especially when no one here in our advertising agency, I am sorry to say, realized that you own the phrase. We were merely quoting in our ads Peter S. Prescott's review of Diary of a Harlem School Teacher in Look, which is a magazine, which begins, Diary of a Harlem School Teacher is the real thing, a short, spare, honest book which will, I suspect, be read a generation hence as a classic. So Megan, there's the answer to your question of why using the phrase it's the real thing. We're quoting it from Prescott. With all best wishes, sincerely yours, Richard C.
So, yeah.
It feels like a Sparta debate in place here.
I feel offended for Coke.
What?
I feel a little offended for Coke.
So, without going sassy, what does Seaver do in his letter back? Because, yes, you can classify it as being sassy, but it's still like academic discourse here that we're using.
From like an argumentation standpoint, he addresses all his counter arguments and kind of shuts them down.
So like kind of does rebuttals
Yeah.
and whatnot. What would be, and I so wholeheartedly agree, what would be like an example of him doing that?
Probably just restating the diluted distinctiveness of the English effectiveness.
And the nice thing, and I don't think the AP people are doing this on purpose for you, but from a location standpoint, what's nice about the use of dilute, distinctiveness, diminish? It's basically parallel because you have it right here on one side, you have it right here on the other side. So if anything, with them being in close proximity, you're kind of, making it pretty parallel for the reader to pick up on those things. So he takes the argument that he's mentioning here, you don't want that to happen, and brings it right up here and goes, hey, it's okay if it does happen. we're okay with it. Because what's the whole point about him mentioning this little, dare I say, anecdote about that vote of 7-6? What does the executive committee agree is okay to happen if we do dilute that distinctiveness? Annie? We're okay if more people buy your soft drink than our book. Or if not that more people buy it, but if more people end up buying the soft drink because of our book. So the whole concern that they have, you know what, yep, we recognize it, it might benefit you, we're okay with that, you don't have to give us money. So yeah, you kind of get this little rebuttal and completely flips the argument back onto Coke, you don't have to worry about it anymore.
There's irony in saying that people would mistake the book for a six-pack of Coke.
And I mean, that's certainly, I think, where that sarcasm really starts to come across. And there's nothing, you know, I said you don't want to say that he's just being sassy. You could certainly mention irony with it. If you were to mention he uses a sarcastic tone, I think that would be a perfect example of it. I mean, it's sarcastic here. It's sarcastic with that vote of 7-6. It's sarcastic with the personnel making sure that, you know, they tell all the salesmen, which, not saying that you have to do this, but if you wrote about tone over here for letter number 1, it would be nice, it doesn't have to be the same type of tone, but by writing about tone over here, you see a little bit of a relationship. If you were going with Matt's rebuttal idea, it's an inherent relationship between the two letters. So if you did have to kind of combine the letters into one paragraph, which hopefully you wouldn't have to do, but if you did have to, it at least allows for some kind of semblance of organization and continuity to still be there. The part that I really like is this last paragraph. Given our strong sentiments concerning the First Amendment, when you read that line, what do you anticipate to be the next line coming after it?
That they have a right to use it.
They being the press, pro-press. Given our strong, you know, defense of the First Amendment, you're waiting for them to go, we think we should be able to use it, but along that rebuttal line, what does he do?
Yeah.
We will defend to the death your right to use the phrase. So the whole argument, it's our phrase, it's our phrase. His letter back, it's okay for you to use the phrase, Coke. We don't have a problem with it. If you're Herbert, you're ripping the letter up and going, I can't stand these people anymore. He doesn't end it there because he does provide, though, what part at the very end?
The context of
The validation. We're just quoting what the reviewer said. We're not taking a line directly from you. We didn't realize you owned Prescott's lines. So there's still that actual credibility. He's just going, you gotta be kidding me that you're gonna try to sue us over something like this. My guess is you're going to find first or second letter more effective.
second.
Most are going to go second. You still could go first. You might be turned off by the way that C was writing. But if that were the case, nothing wrong with writing about, you know, the details, the dates, tone, then going rebuttal, tone, and here's why we find this one to be more convincing. It would still be a very complete essay. Just because it's two passages doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily throw you off. Take a deep breath, make your scared face, then adapt to what the prompt's asking you to do.
I think it's probably a lot easier to write a response, so they kind of put a leg up. Because if you like know what their original letter is, then you know how to shoot them down.
Oh yeah, no, it's nice to be able to respond to what someone is saying rather than it's your responsibility to kind of like establish the argument.
Yeah.
And letter writing is going to be different than like a face-to-face debate because certainly then Coke will go, well, wait a minute, but they don't have that chance because it's all, you know, written.
It's like whenever you're like, don't say anything, I'm gonna go.
Sure. And you keep going. So Darna, reading check quiz, part 1 for tomorrow. Just be ready for that.
Absolutely.